Hello, friends. We come to you kind of late this evening, but I had the time and needed to get this out. So for the May 15th thought paper on the Elohim Declaration, Part 7. And again, we're just going to be going through the highlights. And it's good to go over it. We get to go over it more than once, and let me tell you, that's helpful. So I would recommend that for you too. So we'll try to keep these within a proper time, and yeah, I'll try not to go too fast. So here we go. The Elohim Declaration, once saved, always saved versus cleansing. Okay. Folk today present the conclusion that sinners and sinful flesh are rightly needing a great high priest by saying their uncleanness must be cleansed in the final atonement, whereas the evangelicals hold to the theology of believing in Christ by imputed righteousness and that they are saints equals perfect, but not necessarily, probably not aware of the fact Christ was the lamb slain from before the foundation of the world, in Revelation 13:8, which is your alpha scenario, which means eternal righteousness, imputed righteousness by faith, as is noted in Romans 4, and Abraham by faith being uncircumcised. If you say that for believing in imputed righteousness means once saved, always saved, then at the time, if they do not have faith in the theology of a great high priest and his administration to cleanse, then any idea to claim to be perfect is repulsive and not of the Bible. So here, is it that God intends to have in his people who are unclean and sinful flesh to speak forth with no guile and deliver a perfect testimony? Revelation 12:11, and they overcame him, remember, by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Garments of righteousness, imputed righteousness equals righteousness of the saints equals perfect. Now keep in mind the importance of a perfect testimony, which is bestowed all along by the man in linen to testify against the dragon. Okay. And now take a moment to reread Revelation 12:11. Some will say this is not ye that speak, from Mark 13:11. If someone has a knowledgeable awareness of the sanctuary service, okay, Hebrews 8, sanctuary in heaven, and insists the evangelicals who claim to be perfect are not in harmony with the man in linen as great high priest, therefore means they are once saved, always saved. I think I can say that, yeah, that's what I used to think. This thinking is a legacy of the old Laodicean legalism, and that's what's got to be left behind. That is, in fact, a very subtle outward expression of being the good Christian, and therefore, since one is outwardly good and presents the so-called fruits, then they must be walking with God. Or so we thought, or so you thought, so I thought. Otherwise, they say to be unclean and sinful flesh, you need the man in linen to get cleansed during the final atonement. The problem is very simple. The time of the cleansing of the individual is late in the time of the third woe of Revelation. So it's not when I thought it was. Yeah, and this gets back to, you know, the path of the just is as a shining light that shineth more and more to the perfect day. How else can you explain it, right? Therefore, they also say once saved, always saved means you cannot be perfect because there is a dual atonement. And the ministration of our great high priest and all the effort to prove a dual atonement might seem to be lost. Well, it's not. So here's the correction. The correction of the apotelismatic aspect of Daniel 12, 7, 11, and 12, 1260, 1290, and 1335, that Jesus said was true in Matthew 24:15 by referring to it and using that as a sign for the last days. For us, future 1260, 1290, 1335. In other words, a literal time of 1290 days with the two components of two beasts, the first and second beasts of Revelation 13. One being the 42 months or 1260 days, then the second beast that reigns for the additional plus 30 days of the Abomination of Desolation that Jesus referred to. The apotelismatic. It happened once, it's going to happen again. Daniel 12:11. And then the plus 45 for the 1335 days into the time of the 1335 of Daniel 12:12. And so these thought leaders went as far as they understood. These thought leaders, one of them being the leaders of the last generation here, endorsed by M.L. Andreessen, okay, from the book of Hebrews, the book that he wrote, okay. They went as far as they understood, and this was entirely predicated on the 508, 538, and 1798 error. So you click this link for this thought paper in the description box below, and here is a YouTube link for the proof of this error. Okay, which takes you, let's see, it should work, to here. Yep. So there's the videos for the 1290. Okay. So coming back, it can also be concluded these thought leaders were great thoughtful men, and those who have studied their work never saw the purpose of eternal righteousness in Revelation 13:8, Lamb slain, in its proper context for the Lamb slain, of whom the two divines of John 1:1 are the source of eternal righteousness. Also keep in mind that that eternal righteousness, not our own, not anybody else's, the two divines, that eternal righteousness is what alone defeats the two beasts. So right smack dab in between the two beasts, here's your solution, here's your compass, here's your antidote for defeating the two beasts, the Lamb slain, his eternal righteousness, and the dragon and the miracle working false prophet of Revelation 13. The reason this is important is because the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world pertains to the Alpha identity of Christ and the first angel's message. Worship him that made, right? So it's time to pay attention. Abraham was accounted righteous by faith, not by works, while yet uncircumcised. Let that sink in. Is it then a metaphor of that uncircumcision and cleanness? Yet righteous by faith, the first couplet of 22:11. He that is righteous, let him be righteous still. Also keep in mind Abraham's transgression with Hagar, right? Remember that? Was not carried as a loss of imputed righteousness. And Paul never said Abraham lost that eternal righteousness. Abraham believed it was accounted to him for righteousness. Never lost that eternal righteousness by faith. See Hebrews 11:8-19. Here's your faith chapter. So here's a major problem. The idea claiming to be saints, once saved, always saved, is wrong, because those who see it that way are an advocate for a latter-day righteousness that is bestowed, and that at the current time does not appear to be available. I read that again. The idea of claiming to be saints, or once saved, always saved, is wrong, because those who see it that way are an advocate for a latter-day righteousness that is bestowed, and that at the current time does not appear to be available. But so you either have it, imputed righteousness, or you don't. Many believe this. In fact, this is a major problem, if not outright heresy. Putting it off for a latter day, when he's the lamb slain from before the foundation of the world. In fact, this is a major problem. I read that. From the perspective of Hebrews 12:23, which says, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn, right, which are written in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect. Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. That wasn't at a latter time. Okay? So, the 5 agendas of the sanctuary are based on callings, and they are basically the adjuncts of righteousness by faith. The question is, what happens if you possess the righteousness of the Lamb slain, but do not obey the rest of the program? This is not revealed. It is hinted, however, when you come to the time of the loud cry, after the scarlet woman is destroyed, loud cry, scarlet woman destroyed, and leaves those with the Trinity doctrine having to confront the warning of the first angel's message. Fear God, and worship him that made. That's 2. It's not a Trinity. This becomes a serious fork in the road. Okay? It's either the worship of the dragon and the one God religion, or acknowledge the 2 divines as set forth in John 1:1. What do the righteous decide to be declared righteous still? To the mustard seed now. It is to be highlighted that Jesus emphasized that the smallest of faith, the smallest of faith. Remember, we had those little mustard seeds? I've got an example of a little mustard seed in my Bible. The smallest of faith is enough to save, and he mentioned that, Matthew 17:20. It is well known the evangelicals will say, oh, the final atonement was the old covenant, right? And that old covenant was nailed to the cross. But as we read the other night, even, remember? What was nailed to the cross was the ordinances. Because we've identified, remember those 4 things. He condemned sin in the flesh. So what was nailed to the cross? The sanctuary services, sacrifices, the feasts. But they'll say the final atonement's the old covenant. So here we see a rejection of the latter-day program. Have it nailed to the cross, old covenant finished. You reject the latter-day program, which is rejecting the everlasting gospel. But as God does reveal this, they might not necessarily mean they are lost eternally, but is that they become those of Revelation 20, verse 4, and die in their sins, which corruption puts on incorruption. He that is righteous, let him be righteous still. The blood of the bull and goat on the mercy seat in the Lamb's book of life. So the question is, does this shed light on those who have accepted the gospel of the death of Jesus and imputed righteousness? yet have not followed the Lamb wherever he goes, which they equal the 144,000, which would translate to the men in linen at the altar in the court. Since the presence of the Father also moves from between the cherubim to the threshold of the house, where the man in linen has his writer's inkhorn. There is a stark difference between those who had accepted Christ but didn't go to the altar in the court, in contrast for those who would be judged by their works in the second resurrection. Now, I would encourage you again to have a look at this, and especially the links that are in here for the text, for the extent, for the research. This video is just trying to keep it short, simple, high level, easy. A summary, conclusion for our readers and viewers, so that probably the best thing would be to do was to read the thought paper and then watch the video to help cement this in, because that's what we have to do too. Okay. Garment inspectors versus the man in linen. The man in linen would see the evidence of the internal faith of Abraham, whereas the garment inspectors, those people that, I was one of them. We've all been. Pharisees see themselves as sinful and sinful flesh, as unworthy, and therefore must aspire and achieve perfection in sinful flesh. Not gonna work, is it? I have a small audience before me, and they're saying, no, it's not gonna work, is it? We can't be garment inspectors. The man in linen does it. It's a faith of a mustard seed. It's not at some latter day. The sealing is going on now, and the sealing comes before the final atonement cleansing. I mean, look at all those years we were studying the final atonement and the cleansing, and yes, you can prove it from the book of Hebrews. We thought that was it. Oh, hold on, wait a minute, we had to back up, right? Wait, the sealing comes before the final cleansing, and that's what it is in a nutshell. Jesus said, except your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees. So, yeah, it has to exceed that of the garment inspectors. You can't go to heaven. Again, the problem of any omission of the eternal righteousness of the Lamb slain, 13:8, is easily seen. And you can't omit that. What is to be understood by the modern day Pharisees is the importance of the law of faith. This law of faith, you cannot break this law of faith. It's by faith only. To try to anything other than faith and faith alone, or anything you want to do or think or try and achieve, any work, even the slightest, you break the law of faith unto eternal righteousness. So the big difference between the 144,000 and the great multitude no man could number of Revelation 7, where 2 sealings take place, is the sealing time is unto the readiness for a perfect testimony of the 144,000, not the great multitude, which means no guile. Revelation 12:11, 14:5, and 19:8-10. No guile found in their mouths. And if I just click on this, this should take me. Yeah. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. 2 sealings. That is the reason why in Revelation 7 there is 2 sealings. And the 2 definite couplets, okay, of 22:11, unto in respect to the second couplet of righteous still and holy still. So there's the 2 couplets. Okay, and you click on this. This is what's good about this. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. So there's your first couplet, the first and second. And here's your second couplet. He that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. There's your second couplet. Okay. Because the final atonement of individual ministration occurs deep into the time of the third woe, which is your 1290 to the 1335. There is the blessing to they who wait for the 1335. So you're going to have your 1260, your first beast, your second beast that reigns for the additional 30 days. But there's a special blessing for those who wait for the 1335. Does anybody know what it is? The final atonement, individual ministration of the men and women. What a blessing, right? I mean, can you come up with anything better than that? Now, why are folk today so insistent the ministration of the individual at the court is earlier than the time of the third woe? It is not. Have they forgotten the divine dictum states the court is not measured? And this is what really went, when the light bulb went on for me. The whole Revelation 11 thing was a bit of an enigma, especially with the, don't measure the court. And this is why it's not earlier than the time of the third woe, because instruction was given, don't measure the court. Why? Hey, it's obvious. The individual ministration comes way later. All right, so it's not measured by the reeds. And to say it means otherwise is to not be aware of the everlasting gospel and the 5 agendas of the sanctuary service. I'll read this. Worse is the laziness of their assumed theology, which is for the fact it's the subtle legalism that the evangelicals dislike intensely. And yet both camps have the idea the sealing time equals the white linen garment time and overcoming sin and sinful flesh are one and the same, but it's not. The sealing time for the last generation, the generation that witnesses the return of Jesus, commenced with Luke 21:24, and that was a walk of faith alone. And it was for us to depart from corporate churches, the sealing time, and the process of cleansing of the word with the ultimate sanctification process, the cleansing of theological guile. Revelation 14:5. And because the sealing time of Revelation 7 actually precedes the 3 woes, let me say that again. The sealing time of Revelation 7 precedes the 3 woes. And didn't we think it came after? Now it starts to make sense. That precedes the 3 woes and 7 trumpets. And the 1260, 1290, 1335 commence in the second portion. So you get your first woe, you get your second woe, but in that second woe you have a first and second portion. And the 1260, 1290, 1335 commence in the second portion of the second woe, which is the time of the 8th king. And that means that the time from the fulfillment of Luke 21:24 right to the end, Jesus actually said the apotelesmatic, or second application, more than one application of the same prophecy, principle he cited from Daniel 12:12 is what bookmarks the end point of the apocalypse until the last ministration at the end of the third woe, 1335, which is the time of the men of wonder who appear in one day. Daniel said, blessed are they who waiteth for the 1335. These men of wonder appear in one day. This means then that the final atonement, the cleansing, okay, that we studied about all these years. We thought that was it. The final atonement, the cleansing by our great high priest, is completed deep into the third woe. Woe. Right? But what came before that? The sealing. The 1335. And regardless of that detail, all along it was all about the imputed righteousness of the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world. And what's that about? The Lamb slain? His eternal righteousness. His eternal identity. You can't say that, you believe in Christ's eternal righteousness and have him, give him a starting point, however far back you want to go. That righteousness is eternal. His identity is eternal. John 1:1. The eternal righteousness of the man in linen, John 5:24, is what saves. Okay? And nothing else. You don't come into condemnation. Okay? There's the quote from again, time to review the Alpha and Omega status of He who made. The Alpha, the Lamb slain, and the Omega equals Melchizedek, man-made, great high priest. Both the attributes of the Alpha and Omega are eternal righteousness, and so perhaps the solution to the conundrum is to view both self-stated revelations of He who made, which is Alpha and Omega, Revelation 22:13-16, view both those as the outward manifestation of righteousness by faith, since the cleansing entails the righteous white robes. You want the proof of that? Hebrews 7, which says his priesthood is not transient. He ever liveth to make intercession for them. In verse 28, for the law doth appoint men chief priests, having infirmity, but the word of the oath, that is, after the law, appointeth the Son to the age, having been perfected. Melchizedek ushering in everlasting righteousness. From Melchizedek, Alpha, Lamb slain, to Melchizedek, Omega, made like the Son of God, equals perfected in sonship. Hebrews. And he retakes form of glory in the form of man, equals everlasting righteousness, ushered in at the resurrection. And so this is why apologies remain in order. And we've had to do that. Okay. And I hope that family will have the opportunity to watch this, and they'll know what I mean. What does this mean? Well, you have to say sorry for the once saved, always saved blunder to the accusations against the evangelicals. And they in turn have to say sorry about their triune and Arian emanation theology of the eternal Son doctrine. See? This is where it gets back to the Bible, and it gets to a perfect testimony, because one group may have had something right and wrong, the other group may have had something right and wrong, and the perfect testimony is going to have no guile. It is the latter error which rejects the first angel's warning. So this triune and Arian emanation theology thing, it's that which rejects the first angel's warning of the everlasting gospel. For God and worship him that made. Since Melchizedek was before David or his throne, no triune, no Aryan emanation. Okay. Melchizedek was before Adam. Later, Melchizedek sits at as the second Adam over the throne of David. Now, if you do or do not see the need of feast keeping, then why would the call to go ye out to meet the bridegroom need to be complicated? The test wasn't about the law or feast. Go out and believe equals the same warning and advice of the second angel, a call to go out of Babylon, a walk of faith at the Revelation 18 loud cry, come out of her, my people. So the time of the abomination of desolation offers only one theological disputation. First angel, and it's a matter of worship. This warning is not about Sabbath keeping. It's about who is Christ and why he is worthy to be worshipped. His eternal identity, which opens up his eternal righteousness, imputed righteousness. Clean diapers and baby wipes. The only thing that wipes away imputed righteousness is to deny Christ as the Alpha and Omega, which means to deny your Savior and lose your birthright. What kind of little faith is required for those still in Babylon to have at the time of Revelation 18, a loud cry? If they decide to depart, so what kind of little faith? Yep, you're correct. The size of a mustard seed. Yet to be ambivalent or confused to stay is a time of peril. They will receive the plagues, and this decision is well before the mark of the beast. What about Lot's wife? It's the same exact relation to the call of Revelation 18. She looked back. In her case, she wasn't cleansed by the word to walk by faith. She looked back and became a pillar girl of Saul. Remember? She was told not to look back. Her name is a remembrance. Jesus said, remember Lot's wife. Don't look back. How important is it to remember what he said right now, right? Her name is a remembrance. Remember Lot's wife. And that equals disobedience. Remember Lot's wife. That's the point. Looking back, it's the only thing that wipes away imputed righteousness. So you're either going to wipe away imputed righteousness or you're going to wipe away, okay, what the man in linen wants to wipe away and impute his righteousness. So that's unpardonable sin. Looking back, wiping away imputed righteousness. Then there are the foolish virgins. They equivocated and went off to visit the vendors of oil, remember? They had to go back because they didn't take enough oil. Notice that the foolish virgins still loved the bridegroom, but they were not relying upon his righteousness during the second portion of his great work, his great high priest. His work as great high priest. Yet all along, they still claimed to believe in the second aspect of the Omega status. But the vendors had much more prestige and influence concerning the Alpha status, contrary to John 1. And they accepted the pantheistic routine. So their names were removed since they clashed with the first angel's message. Fear God and worship him that made. To not come out to remain with the vendors of oil equals Lot's wife. Looking back is the purpose of her remembrance, to walk in faith in the call of obedience, which is not law-keeping. All the ditherers and equivocators are all brought to a fork in the road, which is the time of the deadly wound of the seventh king, who's only going to last for a short time, and then subsequently the great city is destroyed. From Revelation 17. It's the midnight. Does this start to make sense? It's a lot to remember. It's not a lot to take in and try and piece together. But when you start seeing it as, oh, it said this way and it said this way, but it's basically the same thing. Time now to go ye out, or remain in all that is Babylonish. Fact remains, the foolish virgins had blessings and insights, but having not the experience of obeying, walking out, and as when the light came, is to not respond to the calling, and therefore looking back, going back to the vendors of oil, Lot's wife. Does this mean then, he that is filthy, no cleansing, remains filthy still? Review again the Elohim Declaration of 22:11. So there you have it. So hopefully this helps, and this is part 7. We're going to continue. And at any point in time, you can stop this, have a think, have a look at the thought paper in the description box below. Click on the links. It's pretty important. I mean, the Elohim Declaration is, he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. He that is holy, let him be holy still. And in which couplet are we going to be found? This is the everlasting gospel. It's time to take it seriously and stop wasting our time on things that don't have any eternal value when it comes to the world, but also we can kind of do that on, you know, things that are like, well, we just want to, you know, don't want to think hard enough. Just be content to, you know, remember the text, you know, preach unto us smooth things, prophesy deceits. It's time to really wake up and pay attention and start really, you know, exercising our brains. So until next time, God bless.